Is your manager helping you grow or holding you back? You can do exceptional work, stay loyal, take initiative, and still feel completely stuck. Not because you're not ready, but because your boss has quietly become the ceiling to your growth. Now, here's what most people do with that feeling: they assume it's a performance problem, then they work harder, they try to get better, they try to wait longer, persevere, but nothing really changes. Because again, the problem was likely not their performance. The problem they're having is that they're misdiagnosing what's actually going on. So let's talk about a few different scenarios here. A threatened boss requires a completely different response than a disengaged one. A boss who doesn't like you will require a different move than if a system is sort of structurally keeping you from growing further. So if you misread which type that you're dealing with and what the issue is of this ceiling that you're hitting, it can take months and you can spend even years using the wrong strategy to try to solve this wrong problem. The issue here is misdiagnosing what's actually going on. Now, research sets this up well. Gallup's workplace data shows that managers account for at least 70% of variance in employee engagement. But what that data doesn't tell you is why. And why the manager relationship is so important is kind of everything and what we're going to talk about today. I refer to this as the boss ceiling, but the ceiling isn't always your boss's character. Sometimes it's their psychology, their capability, or the system around them that causes the issue. So, making sure that you understand what's actually going on is the key to then know how to play the game or what strategy to pursue. So, in this episode or video, we're going to cover what a boss ceiling actually is and what it isn't. We're going to talk about 4 distinct ceiling types, each with its own root cause and ideal response. And I'm going to share a diagnostic framework for identifying which one you are dealing with specifically. And then we'll talk about a few specific scripts and moves for each scenario, plus the mindset shift that stops you from being collateral damage in someone else's limitations. My name is Ramona Shaw, and I am the host of the Manager Track podcast. Let's talk about what a boss ceiling is not. So, what's off limits here? It's not getting tough feedback. It's also not being asked to improve before advancing, right? If someone says, I appreciate that you want to have a promotion, but there are things, gaps, skills that you need to learn and improve on before a promotion is even on the table, that is not the boss ceiling, okay? It's also not a temporary slowdown in your progression because the business is going through something. This could be financial, market related. It could be because of an imminent acquisition. It could be because of tariffs, a bunch of different reasons why a company may stop promoting people. It's also not about not getting a promotion in your first 18 months in the company, whether we like it or not, but there are often these norms that employees need to be there for 12, 18 months before a promotion is even on the table and something to be discussed. Now, granted, there's usually exceptions to these cases, but those are all things that aren't considered part of what we call a boss ceiling because they're either specific to your development, where you have a gap to close first, or they are circumstantial based on what the company's going through, or they're just expectations or norms on how the company operates, not because of your specific performance or achievements. A boss ceiling is specifically when your manager becomes a repeated structural bottleneck to your development, your visibility, and your access to meaningful work. Now, the key word here is repeated. One difficult conversation, one time where you were shut down or excluded from a project is not a ceiling. The ceiling happens when there is a repeated pattern that happens over and over and over again. A client I coached, let's call her Nadia, had been at her company for about 3 years. Now, she consistently received pretty strong reviews. Feedback always landed somewhere around, you're doing great work, keep going. But then she never got any meaningful scope change, even if she did ask to be part of an initiative or she did ask for more responsibility. For some reason, it never really happened. She also had a hard time getting sponsorship. So, like having someone really promote her or support her in her advancement. Any kind of advancement conversation, in fact, didn't seem to go anywhere for real. It was like a nice chat, maybe some mentoring, but nothing more concrete. So she came to coaching believing she needed to fix something about herself, like her executive presence, her communication, her readiness. She wanted to understand, like, why is she not progressing despite all this positive feedback? And she'd been working on those things for over a year at that point. About 20 minutes into our first conversation, a slightly different picture started to emerge. It started to come to light that her boss wasn't withholding advancement because she wasn't capable. He was withholding it because every time she built visibility with senior leadership, he found a way to reinsert himself into the narrative. She was outpacing him and he started to feel it. She's been trying to solve a communication problem that she thought she had, but this was a structural problem, a problem with her boss. She encountered this boss ceiling, and knowing that you're dealing with a boss ceiling, you now need a different response. Now, the number one behavior that is not doing any good when you have a boss ceiling situation is to continue to work hard and even harder, all in the same direction, right? When the ceiling is structural, more output, harder work doesn't break through it. It kind of just increases your effort, makes you more tired, more doubtful of yourself, while your leverage stays flat. So, here are a couple of scripts that you want to keep in mind. When your boss keeps moving the goalpost, it's always like something else, another thing, even more work. You want to pause and say, I want to make sure I understand the criteria here. Can we document the specific milestones together and agree on a check in date? You want to make sure that the milestones that are expected and are supposed to help you get a promotion are clearly documented. Now, when your contributions consistently go uncredited, you can say something like this: I want to make sure my work is visible to the right people. How do you recommend I build that exposure from my current role? So you're now sort of, if they're holding you back and like not making it possible for you to create that visibility on your own, you're now openly addressing that you have a goal to make your role visible. What recommendations do they have? And when they give you suggestions, you bet they're not going to sabotage those suggestions that they themselves have given you. When you say, I'm not quite there yet, what specifically would change your assessment? And what's the realistic timeline we're working with? Get that in writing, not just in a conversation. If this happened in a chat, you want to document this by recapping the conversation in an email afterward. Because at the end of the day, clarity is the antidote to a boss ceiling, that type of ceiling. If they can give you clarity, the absence of clarity or your second best bet is to have data and things documented. Okay. Now, I said earlier, there are different types of boss ceilings. So let's talk about the different types and how you can diagnose them. We're going to use the TAPS diagnostic tool. So there are 4 distinct ceiling types that I want to share with you today. If you get the wrong type or you misdiagnose what's going on, the moves that you make will not really land. So the framework to help you diagnose what you're dealing with is called TAPS. T stands for threatened. This boss experiences your growth as a zero-sum threat to their own relevance, control, or even though like the identity in their organization. Your advancement feels to them like a subtraction to the power or control that they have. You might notice they support you in private, but in public, they're silent. They're not going to promote you. They don't praise you in public. They're not really calling you out and giving attention to the work that you do. Maybe they're even actively minimizing you in front of others. They may also be territorial about senior leadership relationships, and they resist making introductions or inviting you to meetings. They instead kind of keep those relationships really separate from you. I also see those types of threatened bosses describe people as this not quite ready yet without ever defining what ready actually means, because there really isn't anything that would make them ready. They may also become noticeably more distant to you and less pleased when your work gains external attention. When you do something that's being recognized, when you get a shout out from another senior leader or even the CEO, suddenly you notice they're having a negative reaction to it, even if they're trying to sort of hide it, because they probably realize there's an ego at play and I need to play it cool. The underlying dynamic with a threatened boss is scarcity thinking and personal protection. It's very difficult to coach someone out of that. And as an employee, you're definitely the wrong person to do this. A executive coach might get to that. But as an employee, I've never seen that succeed. So the play is to stop routing all your visibility through that single channel and trying to sort of figure out how to convince your boss that they should give you visibility. Instead, your best bet is to start building broader support and find channels outside of your manager to get that recognition and that visibility. You could say, hey, I'd like to build a relationship with James over there. Would you be open to making an introduction? Let's see what they say. Now, their response, maybe even their non-response, will tell you kind of where they stand. Someone who is your manager and doesn't have an ego, they will either say, absolutely, I'm excited for you to get to know them, or they may tell you, yes, but not now, and there's a specific reason for it. They're currently traveling or they're engaged with this other thing. I think making an introduction in a couple of weeks will be more fruitful. Or yes, and here's some suggestions on how to best interact with that person. Those are all positive signs. Again, you can coach a threatened boss into a place of security. Your job is to widen your support network and reduce that single point of failure or that point of ceiling, but not to fix their psychology. So that is the T. Now, A is our next letter, and this is the averse. This isn't about sabotaging you. Instead, it's personal misalignment. It could be chemistry issues, some kind of projection that they have on you. It could be an unconscious bias or a negative impression that they formed early on and never really got updated by subsequent evidence. The way that this may show up is that your mistakes stick longer than comparable ones from peers, right? Your bosses sort of keeps talking about these same issues. Your wins may receive less acknowledgement or attribution than other people's. You might feel or be excluded from informal access, like hallway conversations, introductions that might otherwise happen. You notice like they're trying to avoid those introductions. It's hard to catch them outside of meetings for quick check-ins. They may not be available to you. And you might notice that with other people who demonstrate similar behavior as you do, your boss responds with a warmer or more positive behavior. Now, it's really important here to notice, and an important distinction, this isn't always about something that you did. It can literally be a style mismatch, a bias, some organizational politics that predated you entirely. Maybe you were hired when they didn't want to hire you. They wanted someone else to be in your position. And now they're just kind of not bought into you. It could also be that they remind you of someone that they had a bad experience with. You name it. It may not be because you did something wrong. But the effect on your development is real regardless. So the way to address this, to bring this up, is to ask things such as, hey, I want to strengthen our work relationship. Can you point to a recent specific example where you felt that I missed the mark? So you want to try to get specific feedback and address the elephant in the room without making assumptions. Because saying, like, I think you don't like me, they're most definitely going to deny. But what you do want to do is highlight that something seems off and share your intention to build a stronger relationship. And soliciting some feedback is a good way to do this. So make sure you gather evidence before drawing conclusions. If you've made genuine efforts to improve the dynamic, like with what we just talked about, and nothing shifts, the smartest play may be reducing your exposure rather than trying to convince them, right? Trying to win them over. But that should only be the plan if you've actually and genuinely tried. If you start to think that they don't like you, and because you think they don't like you, now you also don't like them, you just built on that story. Well, if they don't like me, then I'm going to also not like them. Now you're probably creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Make sure that you're giving that person a fair chance. You are the one who continues to like them, to invest in the relationship. You're checking in on what you could do. You're being your best self and interacting with them. And you do this long enough where you have built up that track record that you're the one who wants to build a stronger relationship. And only if you see the repeated pattern of this averse type, that's when you start to look, okay, maybe I got to go elsewhere. So we had T, A, now P in this TAPS framework. P stands for passive. This boss isn't threatened by you. It's also not that they don't like you. It's simply that they won't do the labor, the effort to develop you. Let's talk about what specifically this may look like. It could be that they say the right things but never follow through on any of them. It could be that every growth initiative actually requires you to push, organize, remind them, and track. So every time it is about your development, it feels like you're dragging a rock up the hill. It could be that development conversations get perpetually deferred to, yeah, we'll do that when things slow down. This is not the priority right now. I've heard many of my clients share experience like this. This might be more common than you think. They also agree with your goals, yet invest zero effort in them. So if you have a goal to learn something and to get more exposure to a particular technology or project or initiative, they may say like, yeah, that's great, but they never bring that back up. They never ask how they could be supportive, what kind of introductions they can make, what kind of training that you need. It's basically just like, yeah, I sign off and that's it. So passive bosses are often nice, but niceness without action is still a ceiling. If you think that your boss is not the problem just because they're nice, you might be misdiagnosing that problem again. And that then becomes your most expensive problem. So one line that you can use is to say, hey, I want to get exposure to X. Again, project, initiative, fill in the blank. Specifically, can you help me get into this meeting over the next, let's say, couple of weeks or so? I would really like to participate and learn more about the project, and this meeting would be a great way to do so. You make every ask really concrete and very much low friction. You might even draft the email that they have to send to the host of the meeting to ask for you to join. Hey, to make this easy for you, I drafted a two-liner that you could send on to Maria, who's hosting the meeting. So low friction, as concrete as possible, because with a passive boss, these vague aspirations will produce vague non-results. Plus, specific asks will reveal really quickly whether they are willing to engage or not. That was TAP, and then we have the last one, TAPS, and this is the S for systemic. Your boss may genuinely be in your corner, but the organization is putting a ceiling next to your boss. Now, this is what it might look like. Your boss may give you honest feedback, they may provide real advocacy for you, but nothing moves. You might find that the promotion criteria for your department are unclear or constantly shifting. You might also notice that others with comparable performance are also stalled, or that there's frozen headcount, limited upward roles that you see published, or even sort of a broken talent process throughout the organization. Now, a supportive boss, a great boss in a broken system is still a problem. It's just a different kind of problem, and it therefore requires a different kind of approach if you run into the systematic boss ceiling. One thing that you can say is, if upward movement isn't realistic in the next 12 months, then what can we actively build toward in the meantime? Separate growth from the title. You might not get that title, you might not get the promotion, you might not even get a salary increase, but ask about scope expansion, skill development, and visibility. Plus, build any credentials that you can take and sort of transferable skills that you can take with you if and when you were to leave that organization. Because if the system is genuinely frozen, you'll eventually want to use them somewhere else. And if this is a temporary freeze and temporary systematic issue, then at least you're working towards your development so that when things change, you'll be ready for that next promotion and set up for success. So these are the 4 different types of boss ceilings that I encounter often when working with leaders. Now, if you can't yet identify which type that you're dealing with, use one simple test. Make a specific ask. For example, request a concrete criteria, a timeline, or a direct introduction to someone else, and then observe the quality and the speed or timeliness of their response. Right? Repeated inability to give specifics, regardless of how nice they say that and how warm their tone, is still useful signal and information for you to diagnose what's actually going on. So a couple questions to consider here. First, is this active blocking of my growth, or is it passive neglect? Second, is the pattern unique to me or shared across my peers on this team? Third, when I make a specific ask, do I get a specific answer? And then fourth, am I being given a moving target? Like, we always got to do more, or a clear, achievable path where they're very directly telling me, here's what needs to change in order to get there. Okay, now a quick pause. If what we're covering today is resonating, and if you're someone who wants to take this further, I'd love to tell you about the Leadership Accelerator. This is a 12-week program that we run for new and early stage managers, people who are strong at their jobs and now need to get strong at navigating organizations in these types of scenarios like the boss ceiling. And we go deep on exactly this kind of thing, like reading your environment accurately, building strategic relationships across the org, and creating upward mobility that doesn't depend on any single person's goodwill. Of course, you're also learning all about how to be an effective, competent, and confident leader to your team. The program is cohort-based, so you go through this with your peers who are working through very similar challenges. It includes life coaching, on-demand training, one-on-one support, and it's structured so that the learning sticks in real situations, and this isn't just theory. Now, the second thing to keep in mind as it comes to research is the halo and horn effect. Management psychology research consistently shows that once a manager forms a strong initial impression, be this positive or negative, they filter all subsequent information through that impression and will confirm it. So strong performance from someone viewed negatively actually gets attributed to luck or circumstances or, team effort. But a misstep from someone they favor and see in sort of this positive light gets explained away, like, oh, again, also someone else's fault. If your boss's read on you calcified early, before you'd demonstrated your actual capability, you are now fighting a cognitive filter. And that's really important for you to know. So the halo effect is when we attribute positive things to someone that we like. And the horn effect is when we attribute negative things to someone we don't like, or we see it as them being the problem, even if it isn't. Okay, and the last study I want to mention is the organizational research that shows that managers disproportionately invest development resources, such as mentoring, stretch assignments, sponsorship conversations, and so forth, in people they perceive as similar to themselves. This is well documented and doesn't require conscious malice to operate, right? If you're not in your boss's informal in group, your development is statistically more likely to be deprioritized, regardless of what your performance reviews say. So knowing this may reframe the diagnosis too. Sometimes the issue isn't what you did wrong, it's who the system was designed around by default. And if your boss has this preconceived notion and you find yourself in a situation that hinders your growth, you have to acknowledge it and act accordingly. So the frustration in boss ceiling situations almost always traces back to an implicit contract that was actually never mutually agreed to. So the contract is this: if I perform well, my manager will develop me. But that's not true. Your boss's job is to deliver organizational results. Your development is supposed to align with that. And often it does, but it's not a standing obligation with a delivery date. So the hidden cost of treating your boss as the primary source of your growth is that you optimize for their approval rather than building a track record that will outlast any one relationship. So keep that in mind if you're dealing with a boss ceiling. Now, I hope this episode was helpful. If you have any friends, coworkers, colleagues who are dealing with a situation like this, please share this episode along so that they can see this different perspective and also know how to address the different situations. Thanks so much for the support of the Manager Track podcast and for tuning in to this episode to keep your own development sharp. We'll see you next week with another episode of the Manager Track podcast. Bye for now. If you enjoyed this episode, then check out 2 other awesome resources to help you become a leader people love to work with. This includes a free masterclass on how to successfully lead as a new manager. Check it out at arcova.org/masterclass. The second resource is my best-selling book, The Confident and Competent New Manager: How to Quickly Rise to Success in Your First Leadership Role. Check it out at arcova.org/books or head on over to Amazon and grab your copy there.